Hi, my name's Ian Wallace, and welcome to another weekly podcast of the Messed Up Counsellor. Today, what I'd like to look at is something that affects an awful lot of people in sometimes major ways, sometimes minor ways, and that is anxiety. I think anxiety for most human beings is a part of their world and their life in a small way. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It can become a bad thing, obviously. But I think in some senses that anxiety helps us to check things out, make sure that we're doing things right. It's a reflective process, is anxiety for me personally. So although I am anxious, as you probably won't even realise looking at these podcasts, I am. And things do create anxiety in me. And when I'm in the counselling process, when I'm coming up in new situations, scenarios that I haven't been through before, so I might be meeting a client that I've never seen before, my anxiety levels will raise. And I would hope that for all people who work with people, then those anxiety processes will increase. Now, not necessarily increase in a way that makes it that I can't function, I can't work, I can't do what I need to do. And people probably don't realise it, to be fair. But underneath of that, there'll be a low anxiety process. And as I say, I think that's helpful, personally. And I think that process of having the anxiety gives us an understanding that there's something different happening, there's something new, there's something we just need to reflect on or think about. And it keeps us sharper, it keeps us more aware, more focused, if you like. Now, there's a point where that will not be helpful, obviously, and everybody's different, and anxiety works to a lesser or greater degree. I've only ever had one panic attack in my life, and it was many years ago now, but I don't want another one. I actually thought I was dying, and they hooked me up to machines and checked my heart out and stuff like that, as they do. But it was a major process of my body just stopped. My head stopped. Everything stopped, to be honest, which is why I thought I was having a heart attack. So the process of anxiety can become a very disabling process, as well as an enabling process. So if it's an enabling process, then no real problem with it. You have to understand that it's there to give you something different, something new, something you've never experienced before. You would be anxious about going on a fairground ride that you've never been before on, for example. And that anxiety would probably be heightened. And then there'll be a point where if you've been on it 2 or 3 times, you will not be as anxious. So when we experience things time and time and time again, generally speaking, our anxiety should reduce. When it becomes disabling, that's when it's much more of a problem for a lot of people. And obviously for some people, that can really have an impact on their world and their life in massive ways. This kind of freeze moment aspect. When it's happening, usually we're not aware it's going to happen. It doesn't just build up, really. It comes as a very much a bang kind of process. Most of that is about previous situation scenarios that we've found uncomfortable, threatening, awkward, such like, and those triggers. So if we go through an anxiety attack, then once we've had one, then there usually is a fear of having another one, to be fair. I mean, I have a fear of having another one. I've not had another one as yet. Hopefully I don't have one. But in that process afterwards, there was always that worry, scared feeling of, what if it happens again? What if whatever I was doing happens again? Now, when it came about, I was walking in an area I didn't know. I was not in a danger situation, but it felt as though there was something that I needed to be watchful about, wary about. Now, I can't put my finger on that. I can't tell you what that was. But it made me feel as though, actually, I need to be very careful of this place, this space. And that's when the anxiety hit. Now, in my world, nowadays, as a counsellor, I can look back on things and reflect and see why things occur, what's going on. And for me, that process was historical. And that process was another situation scenario that connected to it, which I'd forgotten about completely until I started doing some reflection work and some inner child work, past history work. When it becomes disabling, then that is a really scary place. Now, the problem being that for some people, those disabling processes, whatever's happening that's creating the anxiety, from another person's perspective would be, well, what are you on about? Nothing in that. Because we all work differently, as I've said on many podcasts, so we can't use our world to understand somebody else's world. We have to say, well, okay, no, that world, that person's world is creating this process of anxiety and being disabling and freezing. So those triggers that happen, in my case, from the past, I hadn't realised. I hadn't thought about. They weren't a part of my conscious world, but they were happening in the back of my mind, in my subconscious, and they reacted as triggers to what I was going through there and then. As I say, for me, that came out the blue. I wasn't aware I was going to have it. But if then a situation keeps reoccurring, which I have anxiety to, then there's probably going to be a process where I don't engage with those things. I don't connect with those aspects that create anxiety. I remove them from my world and my life. And people do that in all sorts of different ways. Phobias will have an anxiety process with them. And that anxiety, that freeze process where everything comes to a stop, we can't necessarily move, is massively hard to understand, obviously, as you're going through it. But it's also massively hard to escape from sometimes. And people's anxiety levels can be massively heightened to the point where everything becomes threatening. Because if we don't understand something, then it kind of scares even more. The thought of the unknown is a scary thought. So anxiety builds on anxiety. And so the anxious process gets more enhanced and more connected and more disabling, more freezing in a sense. And we can try and withdraw from the things that make us anxious. Fairground rides, we could say, okay, let's never go on a fairground ride again. But that process means that that part of our world is, in a sense, taken away. Now, you'll find a lot of those kind of things whereby we're engaging with rides or engaging with extreme sports or those kind of things. Certainly from a female's perspective, when we become parents, we become mums, then we probably don't get into those areas again. Now, that naturally would be to keep our child safe. You know, we're there, we need to be there, so we remove ourselves from risk. That might happen. It might be something around feeling uncomfortable in certain situations, scenarios, with certain people. So we kind of remove those blocks, those aspects that could create an anxiety process in us, which could be fine. You know, we don't need to go onto a fairground ride. It's not going to massively remove things from our world and our life. It's not going to make it so we can't live. But what happens if the anxiety was something about clothes, about touch, about thoughts, ideas? What if the anxiety was in every part of our world and our life? Well, we can't really remove ourselves from that. Even if we stay on our own, even if we stay in our own bedrooms, even if we stay on our own bed, anxiety can chase us because it's in our minds. And our minds is ours, nobody else's. So as we create those anxious thoughts, eventually those anxious thoughts become to anxious physical feelings, which is a panic attack, which becomes then disabling. So it's a process. I don't know why everybody gets anxious. I think it's part and parcel, as I've said, of human beings. I think we're all anxious to a certain degree. I think for some people it's more enhanced, more worrying, more scary. I think for other people it is what it is, and we get over it, and we don't understand other people's anxiety. But in our relationships with other people, that's sometimes really hard, because our relationship partner may have no fear whatever of fairground rides. They may get an enhanced feeling, emotional, chemical, good feeling reaction process. It might enhance our worlds by feeling scared. But for other people, that is not healthy. And these things, as I've said, sometimes come out the blue. Sometimes we don't understand them. And sometimes we never understand them. I was lucky in a sense that my work, my job, my training made those things something we looked at. But if it was something that I wasn't engaged with the counselling world, with the therapy world, then I probably would never have looked at it. And it would always have been a mystery. Why did it occur? What was going on? And that can be really scary, as I've said, because if we don't understand it, then we're more fearful of it. The unknown is usually more fearful than the known for most people. So when I'm feeling anxious in my processes at low level, it can enhance my world. It can make me more alive. It can make me more focused. It can make me more in touch. If it goes over the kind of tipping point, then it becomes disabling. Now, everybody's tipping point's different. No two are the same, because no two people are the same. So, up to a point, it feels okay for me, but it won't be okay for somebody else. So in order to create a process of becoming more acclimatized to the anxiety, if possible, then we have to create scenarios where we can connect to the anxiety but be in control of the anxiety. We do that with small step approach. So we connect to whatever it is that we're creating anxiety from, and we start then looking around and finding ways to acclimatize to it. So I'll give you an example of that. Years and years and years ago in corporate world, I had to do a presentation to about 1,500 people in an auditorium. Now, I'd never done that before in my life. I'd created programs and workshops and training for 20 to 30 people, but I'd never done that kind of size. And everybody looking down at me on stepped processes of seats, like you would in a lecture hall. And I'm in the front, and all the eyes are on me. So I said to my boss at the time, I said, "Whoa, this is something that I really do not want to do." I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, all those people looking at me, all those people connecting to me." And he said, "Yeah, that's true, But you cope with when you're doing 30, 40, 50 people in a training program." I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "So why?" I said, "I have no idea. I don't know. It's, in a sense, an unknown. I had no idea what it was going to be like. I'd never been in that situation before. So that was new. That was different." I said, "So it's the number." And I said, "Yeah, it's 1,500 people looking at me. What happens if I get it wrong? What happens if I fluff my lines? What happens if I don't? If the projector doesn't work or whatever, the PowerPoint, or somebody kind of like disagrees with me, or there's a whole range of things that could have happened." And he said, "Okay, yeah, I get that. Totally understand that." He said, "So we need to find a way of connecting to that anxiety, that fear, and bringing that fear level down." I said, "Yeah, that sounds feasible. How are we going to do that, though?" And he said, "Okay, what would happen if you were only talking to 5 people instead of 1,500 people? I said, oh, that'll be a lot easier because I've done 30, 40, 50 people in a room. I've presented things to people. Okay, so we need it to be 5 people, not 1,500 people. I said, so are you going to make all these people disappear? And he said, no, they're all going to be there. And he said, but we have 5 people in the team, apart from you. And I said, yeah, and you know all those people. You're quite happy with those people. You connect to those people. Yeah, great team. So what we do is we arrange these people in the room. So we have one person up on the top left, we have one person top right, we have one person bottom right, we have one person bottom left, we have one person in the middle. Okay. Wondering where he's going with this, as you do. And he said, so you have a conversation, you present this hour-and-a-half programme to 5 people. The other 1,495 don't understand that you're not talking to them because you're moving around the room. You're looking at the people. So everybody believes you're talking to them. I said, oh, right, okay. Now, I wasn't completely in on that one, as you can appreciate. And as the time drew to a close that we were going to have before this thing was going to occur, my anxiety level was raising, obviously. So I said, okay, so we'll do a run-through. We'll do the whole presentation that you're going to do to the 5 people in the team. Acclimatization. So try and put your head there before it happens. Try and give you a sense of what's going to happen in the room. Try and develop that and grow that and build that. And that process, although was still anxious, I will say I walked into the auditorium in a very non-sweaty way, as you imagine. But it kind of gave me an acclimatized process to what I was going to do. I'd already studied the stuff that I was going to give. I'd already done the run-through. I'd already presented it to the 5 people. And I was just doing another presentation to 5 people. And that helped me understand me an awful lot. Helped me understand anxiety from my point of view and how I might work with it. The unknown is the anxious, or maybe the anxious thing, or if we've done something previously that hasn't worked, then the anxiety levels would be higher. So if we'd have done something that kind of created a disturbance, we're probably going to be more anxious next time we try it. But in acclimatizing to that, into kind of changing that aspect of how this might play out, because I'd done some pre-running processes, pre-awareness processes, then I came through it. When I present now to any number of people, which I have done since in my world, in my life, then I don't have that anxiety anymore to that level. I'll still have anxiety because it's different, it's new, I've never done it before. But that reduces now to what it would have been had I not gone through that process. As I say, it taught me a great lesson. That anxiety is just something I've never done before. Fear is just something we've never done before. Once we've done it, once we've connected to it, once we've had a share of it, a taste of it, then we still may be anxious, obviously, but we probably won't be as anxious. And so that the more that we do something, the less anxious we become. Now, that's not an easy one to do, I know that. And believe me, when it was happening to me, it was really not an easy process. Even though looking back now, 30 odd, 40 years ago, it's a lot easier to understand it. But if we don't challenge the anxiety, if we don't try to get in control of it to a small or large degree, then the anxiety in itself will necessarily close us down, will make it less than what we can do. We will remove ourselves from the aspects. So a small step approach is steps that we can achieve, steps that we can build on, steps that we can become more acclimatized to, more connected to, more in charge of, more in control of. And as we work through that process in life, then hopefully it won't immobilize us as much. But for people who are really immobilized by anxiety, just telling them to snap out of it won't work, unfortunately, like a lot of things. We have to give them that respect and value to see that from their point of view, from their world, it's real. It is not something we can just snap out of, because if we could, we would. It's about helping them to understand it. It's about being patient, being kind, and reducing that process of friction, making them feel as though actually that's completely normal for you and others. And normalising is a massive part of it. In my world, with the presentation in the auditorium, my boss, Steve, said, right, okay, this is the way we're going to work it. And he supported me, he backed me, and my other colleagues backed me and supported me. So they didn't see it as being, you're wrong or you're bad or you're mad or any of those kind of things. They helped me to work through that process. And for that, I'll be forever in debt, to be fair. Because now I can be in front of this camera. I don't know how many people I'm looking at, obviously, but I can be in an auditorium with 1,000, 2,000 people. Never ever going to be a problem now. Unless you forget to switch the microphone off when you go to the toilet. That was a big one. And if anybody's done any presentation on audio mics and they haven't switched the microphone off when they've gone somewhere, then you'll know exactly what I mean. Hopefully that helped and made sense, and it gave you some ideas. And if you know somebody that is anxious, try to help them through that. Don't make them or target them to make them feel as though they're the problem, that it's silly or stupid or ridiculous, because it isn't. As you're going through this process, please share, like this podcast, because you never know if anybody's going to need it. Most people who are anxious don't let you know they're anxious. They hide it, and usually they hide it well. So this might help people that you are not aware of that need help. Thanks for listening. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counselor. Take care.